Hey everyone, welcome to the 205th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have a stellar show for you today. A lot of industrial and enterprise news. So ARM did a big deal this week on its PSA security platform and program that we're going to talk about. Kevin has a story for the smart home all about gestures, and it actually ties into Microsoft's new Kinect camera for business. We're going to talk about using Madam A and the Amazon Echo in hospitals. We've got some new chips out with Madam A capabilities that we're going to discuss. And we ask the question, who should enforce a federal privacy law if we get one? Then we're going to run down some industrial IoT news from both Embedded World and Mobile World Congress that happened this week. Plus, our guest this week is Beth Carlin, who is the CEO and founder of the Sea Change Institute. We're going to be talking about how utilities are looking at the smart home and going to control energy consumption. And we'll hear from our sponsor, UrbanX, and one of their startups in the construction space. So all of this is coming at you in just a moment. Let's hear from another one of our sponsors, Western Digital. Western Digital builds data solutions that enable the world to solve its biggest challenges. Introducing their most advanced flash storage solution, the EU511. It is built to empower 5G mobile devices. You can play more games, save more memories, and binge more videos. So get ready for your 5G future at westerndigital.com. Oh man, Kevin, we are going to be talking about 5G later on the show, so woohoo!
My favorite topic.
So get your jargon hat on. It's going to be fun. But first, let's talk about ARM. ARM, the chip licensing company that is basically the heart of every smartphone out there, has a really big vision for the IoT. The chairman of SoftBank, which bought ARM a while back, has this vision of 1 trillion connected devices by, I think it's 2025. And I don't know if we're going to get there, but if we do, we're going to have to improve on security because right now it is holier than, I don't know, a Catholic church. So what ARM is doing is last year at TechCon, they announced something called the PSA, and that is their security platform. What they've done now is created a certification program for it and APIs that make it easy for non-semiconductor engineers to enable the security elements. So if you want something that's secured at the device level, you have to have some sort of hardware isolation, hardware-based root of trust, and a place for like cryptography and key management and all of that. And if all of those words meant nothing to you, basically imagine it as a little separate room on a chip that allows you to put all your secrets in there, and you can understand if someone's actually tried to access it. It's also a place that can generate cryptography, so generate code for more secrets, and it will boot up on its own without talking to anything else on the chip. So if the rest of the chip is infected, this area is like quarantined.
There's more to what they've done. I know you're going to talk about it, but this reminds me, at least partially, of something I had said a couple months ago when I was talking about Chromebooks. In fact, every one of those has a trusted platform module, and that chip basically verifies that the firmware on the device, in this case a Chromebook, has not been tampered with. This does more than that, but it is very similar. I'm thrilled to see this.
Yes. So this is designed for anything. And by anything, I mean tiny, tiny MCUs, big smartphone platforms, all of the above. This sort of little secret room on a chip has been around for a while. They call them trusted execution environments or trusted execution modules, TEMs or TEEs. Chip makers have been putting them on their silicon for a while. The challenge has been, if you don't know how to engineer in silicon, if you're just like this normal person who's like, I'm going to build an IoT device, but you don't have the budget to hire like 100 really smart people to develop your board, what happens is you don't actually usually enable all of the secure elements. So it's there, but you don't actually ever use the room.
It really doesn't add any security if you don't use it.
Yes. So you're like, I've got this awesome room in my house, and we never go into it. So what they've done is they've added APIs that make it really easy for you to like open up the door to that room and start playing with those tools in a way that is familiar to like software developers.
And now I get to actually leverage some of the stuff I've been learning in my Java class. So they've encapsulated all of this functionality, and the data is only accessible through those APIs. So it's not like a hardware manufacturer who has to actually add software to their product to make it work can mess around with this. They have access to it to use it and beef up security, but in a controlled way is probably the best way to say it.
So this is good. And even better is ARM they've basically set different levels of certification for this. So at level 1, you've got like the most basic security. Level 2, little fancier. It takes about a month to get your level 2 certification. And then level 3 is like, we don't even know what it is yet. It's super, super fancy and it's going to take a while. Nobody has that yet, but a whole bunch of big names in the chip industry, Cypress, Microchip, Nordic, NXP, ST Micro, Silicon Labs, a Taiwanese company called Nuvoton, all of those guys are implementing this. So most of them will have level 1 certified chips out on the market. They're going to beef that up as time goes on. It also, this whole platform that ARM has introduced with PSA is also ties into other security efforts, like UL has their own security effort. This fits in with that. So what we're seeing is both the ability to standardize some basic good security practices from the hardware level across a bunch of different standards organizations, which should help the whole industry. And they're making it easier for application developers to actually use it. So this is a big deal and really promising. I'm very excited about this.
It is. It's very good. We harp on security for IoT devices all the time for good reason. There is a downside, and that is...
Tell me the downside.
None of the devices you have are capable of this today.
Oh, that's true.
So you're going to have to buy new devices if you want this type of security. And you do.
Gosh.
You want this type of security.
You do want this type. All right. Well, after Kevin has rained on my parade with a very inaccurate thing, I'm going to let him get you all excited about something fresh, funky, and new. At Mobile World Congress, we are seeing lots of news about gesture-based phones and automotive platforms and even a camera for enterprises. You want to talk about gesture?
I do want to talk about gestures, and yes, this goes into that funky, loopy space that I often find myself in as I'm forward-thinking. You had mentioned some of the announcements at MWC this week. BMW, for example, was showing off their natural interaction platform, which is expected in 2021. It uses voice capabilities, as most new cars do today, either natively or through a plug-in device that you can add to the car. They're going to add gesture controls as well, and I love that because if I'm driving and I need to, say, change the radio station or do something that requires me to look away, that's bad. So with gestures, you can potentially point at your radio and maybe flip your finger up and it would go to the next channel, for example. So that is cool. They're also adding smarts to it. We'll see if they deliver on this, but you will be able to actually point at things as you're driving past them. And the system will recognize your gesture as a pointer to that thing, which the cars have cameras and other sensors, GPS as well, and it can actually tell you about that place. So maybe you want to know if a restaurant is open as you're driving by. That's incredible. I love it. We'll see if it happens. Additionally, you mentioned phones, and LG announced their G8 ThinQ. That's their new flagship phone. And they have a time of flight sensor in there. And they're not the first to do this, but they are the latest to do this. And what that allows them to do is add touchless gestures to the phone interface. It can even scan the palm of a user a few inches away to unlock the phone. So we're seeing all these new applications for these types of sensors. Cameras, these are more of...
These are depth sensing sensors.
Exactly.
So exactly. It's basically like radar plus math. So with the time of flight sensor, they're sending out the signal, it bounces back. They do math to see how it fits within the map they've created of the room. It's a very cool thing. It's the same technology that was actually in the Lighthouse cameras that we talked about a while back. And I had their CEO on the podcast talking about these sensors. Unfortunately, Lighthouse is now out of business. But the fact that these are going to be in smartphones and possibly in cars, These are things that sell a lot of devices, which means the cost of this technology and the number of people who can develop against it will expand, which makes it more accessible for the home and other use cases. So that's very positive.
And that's where it could be interesting to see in the home, because today, most home control is done through voice. I mean, sure, there's apps as well, but why are we buying all these smart speakers? Well, we want to control things with our voice. Once you start having lower cost sensors that can do other things, such as determine or read gestures and interpret them, that brings a whole new level of home interaction, at least the possibility for it. So with the lower cost of these sensors, I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing a quieter smart home where you could control things by voice, but maybe if somebody is sleeping next to you as you're reading a book, you want to turn the heat up, you just point at your thermostat and then maybe a gesture to raise the heat or lower it, whatever. I mean, there's a world of possibilities here. So it's kind of interesting. And an early precursor to all this was the Xbox Kinect, which had a depth sensor. It was an IR depth sensor and an RGB camera. It actually worked. It just, the application for it was gaming, obviously. But
yes, I used to want to use the Kinect to do my disco lights on. And I could not figure out an easy way to establish that gesture and then connect it to my smart home stuff. So the party light, the Hue lights would go on for disco night.
Yeah, well, two things. One, they did have an SDK out there that I looked at. It might have been doable at the time. I don't know. They don't make the Kinect anymore. And two, there is not and never will be a disco night at my house. So
aren't you no fun? But Microsoft is bringing the Kinect back. They're bringing it back for enterprise uses in Azure. And this ties back to something I saw last year at Build when they had this crazy conference room that recognized people when they came in, if they were seated, and started taking notes on their behalf. It was crazy. So I'm curious how that's going to work.
I'd like to follow that to see how successful it is, because that could then translate into what we might see in the home. And I'll just leave everybody hanging with one last thought, because to me, it's not just about gestures and control. It's also about adding more smarts and context through the home.
Yes, because otherwise you're going to get crazy false positives.
Yeah.
I can't wave at something and assume it's waving at me because I wave to my dog. I know, I'm weird. I wave to people in my house. I wave to people on Skype. I'm waving at Kevin right now.
I can vouch for that, yes.
There's going to be some development that needs to take place, but never say never in the tech world, man. All right, let's see. What do we got next? Oh, we have Madam A used in hospitals.
Yeah, this is a really interesting article I read over at Gizmodo. There's about 100 patient rooms at Cedars-Sinai Hospital that are equipped with Madam A Echo devices. There's a Madam A powered platform at the hospital called Ava, and this allows the patients to say, Madam A, change the channel, instead of calling a nurse, or Madam A, tell the nurse I need to use the bathroom, etc. So it's an easier way for patients to communicate either with the nurses or directly with items in their room. And I just never thought of it that way, putting Madam A in hospital rooms, but it makes total sense.
There are HIPAA concerns that we would have related to that. So one of the questions is, how do you bring voice everywhere and still follow the rules of particular industries? So in hospitals, you're going to have to think about HIPAA. You're going to have to think about a device that is either protected from germs and weird stuff that happens in hospitals. In an enterprise, you're going to have to think about admin information rights, access, that kind of thing. So I like it.
If that's all figured out, and I don't know that it is or isn't, I haven't seen terms of service or anything here, it really opens up additional possibilities. And in fact, they're already using some of them. So if a patient says, I need painkillers, for example, says that to their Echo, a nurse would actually get that request. But if it's some other request, perhaps a specialist in that field would get the request to come into a checkup. So they're intelligently routing the request as well. But then again, that also provides the cloud with some personal patient information.
Right. Well, speaking of Madam A, which, by the way, if you haven't figured it out, this is how we refer to Amazon's digital assistant, so as not to set off yours, there are 2 chip announcements worth mentioning. 1, NXP has come out with a microcontroller that has AVS, which is Madam A's voice services, on it. And this is really neat. This is basically an MCU is very low power, very dumb kind of device. It's inside a lot of sensors. For a while, it's been inside like microwaves, and even washing machines have MCUs. These are like hardcore embedded chips. What's interesting here is now with a device like this, you can actually put Madame A, the capability to listen for a wake word and then wake up, on an MCU, which, whoa, that means Madame A could literally be everywhere. It's a little disconcerting for people, I'm sure. So,
yeah, this is obviously a little chip. I mean, we're talking about microcontrollers, so obviously it's small, but it's only a centimeter square.
Yeah.
Impressive.
That's what the internet does. It connects you back to the giant brains in the cloud. So the other news bit, Kevin found this, and since it ties so nicely back into a lot of things we talk about, Qualcomm has done a reference design with Amazon to build a Wi-Fi chip with AVS, Madame A's voice services on it.
Well, isn't that funny? Because I think somebody wrote an article about these smart speakers really should be integrated as mesh Wi-Fi points. And sure enough, Qualcomm has its smart audio development kit for Amazon AVS. It's far more than that microcontroller that we just talked about. This is an actual CPU that might be used in, say, a low-end smartphone. It seems to be the Snapdragon 410 series based on the information that Qualcomm has provided and what we've kind of deduced. So it's got everything in it. I mean, it can drive up to 720p on a display. It obviously has Wi-Fi, 802.11ac. It has Bluetooth. It has
the kitchen sink. No,
it's all in there. Yeah, with the digital microphone input, up to 6 digital mics. Can play back high definition audio music. It has a GPU. Quick charge support, which is interesting. I don't know if that will ever be used. Certainly not in a Wi-Fi.
Move your access points around. Yeah. For like 2 hours.
Exactly. But, I mean, this could lead to what I was thinking, an actual all-in-one a smart speaker / access point, so we can start reducing the number of things that we have to plug in and connect to in our house.
Well, and with the video capabilities, it could be something like a Google Home Hub, but it wouldn't be that because this is AVS. But it
would be like an Echo Show.
Like an Echo Show with 720, which isn't awesome, but, a small, or an Echo Spot. So something like that could then become both a video screen, a Wi-Fi access point, and your digital assistant. So very cool. Lots of news out of Mobile World Congress. We'll talk a little bit more about some other bits of news. But first, let's ask a question. My friend David Mayer, who used to work with us at GigaOM, he asked a really interesting question, which is who should enforce a federal privacy law in the U.S.? And the idea here is if the U.S. gets a GDPR-style law for privacy, what agency would enforce it? And I had assumed it would be the FTC, but in reading his article, I learned much. Like, the FTC doesn't actually have the ability to level civil penalties against companies. And that's kind of something, make it hurt. GDPR charges you up to 4% of revenue. That's crazy. So the FTC does want this job. They have done some privacy cases, usually not as effectively. There's some weird regulatory blocks in place for them, but they do have some experience. The other option would be state attorneys general. We see that a lot. The downside to something like that is if you don't get California or New York, basically, to act, there's going to be a lot of state attorneys general who are like, yeah, I don't care about this. So you'll have to have a big state. Like if North Dakota does this, I can see someone being like, yeah, we don't need to sell in North Dakota. There's like not even 1 million people in that state. So sorry, North Dakota. That's something to think about. And then the other option is create a whole new agency. I tend to hate the idea of creating a whole new agency just because, good Lord, we have so many agencies already. But the privacy folks are actually kind of excited about that. I think new agencies maybe have a few years of effectiveness before they're suffering from regulatory capture. So I'm kind of like, I'm pro FTC.
Yeah, but they'd have to change the FTC's scope of power, and that could lead to other issues. I hate to say it, but a new agency for this and related things may be a good thing because all these agencies were created well before the age of internet, let alone the age of IoT. I hate to say it, but that may be the best thing.
No new agencies.
I know.
That is a fight that will happen in Washington if we ever get federal privacy legislation. So, in the meantime, let's look to California and their law that should go into effect in 2020. All right, let's talk about news from both Embedded World and Mobile World Congress. We'll start with news from Embedded World. Kevin, you want to talk about Google's cloud IoT devices?
Yeah, we've talked before about Google Cloud IoT Core, which is Google's platform to manage devices. They now have a Cloud IoT Device SDK, and that will allow product makers and developers to connect embedded IoT devices to the Google Cloud IoT Core. So that makes things easier. If
oh my
you want
gosh,
to use
it's end to end.
Yes. If you want to use Google's platform, they don't mention any specific MCUs. They're saying a wide array. Will be able to use them across various real-time operating systems such as Zephyr, ARM, Mbed OS, FreeRTOS, and more to come. So they're looking at ways to make it easier for the really small chips to get connected to their IoT platform.
That's good. I mean, Microsoft's done that already, so has Amazon, so Google...
They're catching up again.
Get on it, Google. That's me snapping my fingers. All right, Wind River, which they've been in embedded software forever. They were actually bought by Intel, as Intel was like, IoT is going to be hot. And Intel was like, never mind, and they spun it back out again. Wind River has done some new software for embedded IoT systems. It's called the Helix platform. Basically, this is designed to give you a platform in systems that need to be highly secure, highly reliable, like avionics, industrial, utilities. We're seeing a lot of stuff about this. This is going to use Wind River's RTOS, real-time operating system. We'll include a link to this if you want to dig in. It's another new software platform for industrial IoT from a company that has been in the embedded space for literally decades, before it was cool. All right. SAP has announced that they are boosting their Leonardo toolkit. Leonardo was something they announced a while back, probably 2 years ago.
Every time I hear Leonardo, I think of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So,
I think of Da Vinci. We're different people. So basically, the SAP Leonardo IoT suite is going to let you use SAP on your IoT data. So you're going to be able to pull your IoT data from your old school stuff into SAP in a way that's easy. SAP also did a deal with Microsoft. They're going to let you use Azure IoT Hub as your connectivity and device management layer for your IoT data. That means down at the edge, you're going to be able to do this. And I'm assuming this deal also makes it easier, because right now it's not like it's very easy to use Microsoft Azure IoT Hub at the edge. I know that Microsoft says it's super easy, but they haven't made it super robust for people. So adding this SAP Leonardo might make that a little easier. So that's that SAP Leonardo news. Microsoft has announced the release of Windows Server IoT 2019. Yay! So this is what Microsoft calls the binary equivalent to Windows Server 2019. What's notable here is that it has 5 years of support and 5 years of extended support, giving you a whole whopping 10 years of support for your IoT devices, which is a big deal. Most companies don't want to support things that long, but in the IoT, you have to. And the IoT guys are actually like, they want 20 years, but so far they haven't found that with anyone. Maybe.
Things change so much in 10. I don't see that 20 makes that much of a difference.
And that's going to be a sea change for industrial guys. They're like,
yes,
they're used to these cycles, and it makes sense because they're of the if it isn't broke, don't fix it kind of mindset, because they've got all these safety regulations. You know, if you're building an airplane, you don't want to do a software update every year because you've got to get that certified through the FAA and all of this. And basically, this is a big shift for them. And we don't really talk about that a lot, but it's worth noting. And then at Mobile World Congress, Bosch and Qualcomm teamed up for industrial IoT for 5G NR. 5G NR, if you guys are like, what? Is the next generation release of the standard for 5G on mobile networks. It's set by a group called the 3GPP. And those guys are looking at how we can use 5G in industrial environments. There's a couple things you're going to need for doing that in industrial environments. One of them is the ability to have deterministic networking. So basically, let certain packets go through if they have to, We've talked about this a little bit in the newsletter. This is things like, hey, if you're streaming a Netflix video and you've got a control system for your industrial, cement mixer, those systems should go before your Netflix packets.
Makes sense.
Yeah. They call it, in the standard, they call it Ultra Reliable Low Latency Communications, or EURLLC.
Blech.
Yeah, exactly. So we're not going to say those words. We're just going to say, hey, you got to prioritize your safety stuff and control system stuff ahead of your Netflix, which I don't know why you're watching Netflix on a factory floor anyway.
I do not know.
They also are going to be looking at factories, which are really crappy radio environments. There's a lot of metal machinery. It's moving around. There's liquids and slurries and things like that will attenuate wireless signals. So they're actually looking at how to create a wireless signal that works in that environment. It's got to be reliable. It's probably going to be mesh. It's going to be fun. So,
and if you were curious, just because you like acronyms, if you're wondering what the NR is, it is 5G New Radio.
Yep.
Which is really odd of a name. Of course it's a new radio. It's a new technology.
Anyway, so that all happened. Lots of other news coming out of Mobile World Congress and Embedded World, but those were kind of the highlights we thought were exciting, or maybe just worth knowing. I don't know how many people can get excited about industrial IoT, but I sure can. Kevin's like,
you talk about that. I'm watching Netflix.
Yes, exactly. My packets will win. Okay. Now it is time to take a voicemail from the IoT Podcast Hotline. Yay! The IoT Podcast Hotline is sponsored by Affero. With the 5th largest IoT patent portfolio in the world, Affero provides a proven IoT platform that doesn't risk your brand. Affero customers have experienced as much as an 80% reduction in time to market and 10x higher activation rates. Learn more at affero.io. This, guys, is the last day. Actually, Thursday is the last day for you to be entered to win a Wemo dimmer switch if you call us and leave us a question on the hotline. So get those in before midnight Eastern on February 28th. Next month, I don't know what we're giving away yet, but I'll figure it out. Let's hear from this week's caller about his Nest doorbell.
Hi, Kevin and Stacy. I have a quick question for you. I used to use a Ring doorbell. For some reason, it just wasn't working out for me, so I switched over to a Nest Hello video doorbell. One thing I liked about the Ring doorbell was I could put remote bells in various areas of the house, so I could hear it in different rooms. I don't see the Nest Hello offering that capability. Do you know of any workaround, or is there any kind of a remote chime for the Nest Hello doorbell? Appreciate it. Thanks, bye.
I actually had this system set up in my house, so this is easy. Basically, Nest does not have an external chime, but what you can do is go out and buy a $39 Google Mini or get a Spotify subscription and get a Google Mini, or I don't know, you can buy lots of things and get a Google Mini. So grab one of those, put it upstairs, and you will just enable this in the settings section where you will enable voice announcements is what it's called. And then magically, when your doorbell rings, not when a motion is triggered, just when someone pushes the button, it will do an announcement that says someone is at the door. If you have face recognition enabled on it and the person is recognized, it will actually tell you, Sophia is at the door, which is kind of cool.
It is kind of cool, but there's a catch. As we found out this morning before the show when I double-checked the setup in my home, because I have a Nest Hello as well. I've got a couple minis around the house, and I have several smart displays as well. And when I went through the setup steps, it was not working for me. However, we researched, and it appears that you need to have personal results on in your Google Home/Assistant settings. So that's, if it's not working for you when you go through the setup steps, you'll want to enable that. Once I had that set up, everything chimed in my house and video showed up on my smart displays when I tested the doorbell by ringing it. So just be aware that you may need to turn personal results on.
Yes. And for those of you who have a question, I realized I did not tell you the secret number you should call. It is 512-623-7424. That is what you're going to call to leave us a voicemail asking your question and be entered to win that Wemo dimmer switch. Now, if y'all will stay tuned, we're going to have Beth Carlin, who is the CEO and founder of the Sea Change Institute, talk about how utilities are trying to control energy usage in the smart home and how Amazon, Google, and whatnot might help them. So stay tuned. Hey everyone, we are taking a break from this week's Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is UrbanX. It is an accelerator for startups reimagining the city life. And we have one of the participants in the program, Merav Oren, who is the co-founder and CEO of Versatile Natures. Let's get started with just a quick understanding of what Versatile Natures does.
So Versatile Natures transforms construction sites into a smart data collection field, allowing for detailed analysis on the project status while actually dramatically improving on-site safety. We install a box of IoT sensors on the hook of the crane on the job site, giving a view of the entire site. The collected data is actually analyzed to provide real-time insights, helping to improve not only productivity, but as I said, safety as well. Our proprietary CraneView system is the most non-invasive system in the market today and is very much ROI positive.
Excellent. With the Internet of Things, how do you think the world of construction will change?
From our perspective, utilizing what is technically industrial IoT, we're doing that from the heart of the job site. So controlling a data stream, understanding 24/7 of pretty much everything going on the job site enables learning and understanding. I look at any other manufacturing industry, and if you think about it, this is a factory. It's just not connected today. It is fragmented and non-structured, but if you still look at it from a factory perspective, it will run closer to, let's say, the BMW factories or Intel, where most of my team comes from. And I believe that's where construction should and is heading.
And why did you decide to join the UrbanX program?
UrbanX was actually one of our best decisions. We graduated about a year ago, and what drew us into the program was their incredible value proposition where it comes to entrepreneurs in residence, helping with design, hardware, and even some of the software aspects. BMW Mini and UrbanUs are extremely synergetic, and that proves to be extremely valuable, and I would generally recommend it to anyone that's currently thinking about applying.
Excellent. All right. And where can we go to learn more about Versatile Natures and how to apply for UrbanX's program?
So you could definitely visit us at versatile.ai. For UrbanX, you should check out urban-x.com/apply.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Beth Carlin, who is the founder and CEO of the Sea Change Institute. Hi Beth, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Stacey?
I am excellent. So let's get it started with a quick question on what is the Sea Change Institute?
Sea Change is a research institute. I'm a research psychologist by training, and we're comprised of various primarily social and behavioral scientists that have decided that we wanted to leave the ivory tower and conduct science on specifically behavior change programs for social and environmental justice issues.
Okay. And I met Beth a couple years ago when she was working with a large utility trying to figure out, does the smart home actually help with conservation? And the answer to that was, it depends. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and a little bit about the ways utilities think about the smart home, and then probably something wild and crazy just to surprise us all. So last time we talked about how the smart home may help reduce energy usage. After years of looking at that, do you think it does?
I think, as you said, it can. I think it depends. I started getting into this work before we even had a smart home as smart as we do now. I was starting my doctoral research about 12 years ago, and at that time, Google had just put out, way before we had any smart thermostats, they just put out something called the power meter. When we were just starting to install smart meters, the idea was if people had information about the energy use in their home, they could use it to change their behavior. Right now, if you think about when you get a monthly bill, you get one number that tells you how much energy your entire home used for an entire month. It's not broken down by day, by hour, or by the thing in your house. It's not broken down by television versus computer versus refrigerator. It's like if you went to the grocery store and you could just go there and just take food, and you got a bill from Trader Joe's. And the concept was that if you give people information, they can change their behavior. And the answer, the truth is, yes, they can. That doesn't mean they will, right? There's nutritional information on the back of all of our foods. People still eat Oreo cookies, even though they have 2 saturated grams of fat each. So the smart home combines that information ecosystem with a second affordance, which is control. So not only can we get better information about energy being used in our homes and see when are we using energy and how are we using energy, which might help us make better decisions if we want to, we also now have the opportunity to control it via a smartphone, a voice assistant. When we're at work and we think, oh gosh, did I turn off the lights when I left? You can check and turn them off. So there's all of this opportunity, but the smart home in and of itself does not save energy. So the answer is yes, if people choose to act.
I will say that I have tried a lot of connected devices that are supposed to help me with my energy use, starting with smart thermostats, which was kind of nice, but ultimately because I work from home and I don't want to work in an office that's 80 degrees during the summer, it didn't save me that much money. And then the next level was putting this device on my circuit breaker box and having it tell me like, hey, your TVs use this much energy and your ovens use this much energy. But again, after a certain point, it's not like I could swap out my oven to get something more energy efficient. And so is there a way for me to really start changing how I use energy based on the information I get?
I think you're getting at the right point. It's about the incentive. It is possible to use the current product ecosystem to save energy. And for people who are really hackers, who are really into it, they can. So even your cooking example, you could, if you really wanted to optimize for cooking, you could cook a small thing like a chicken or a morning waffles in a big oven and then in a smaller convection oven. And if you have that data, you could see, wow, if something doesn't need to use a large oven, when I cook it in a smaller convection oven, it does use a lot less energy. And I care so much about that small amount of savings that I'm going to start cooking in that small convection oven. It takes an energy geek to go to that amount of effort.
Oh dear, I've already done that.
Did you? So there's a couple things. One is the savings are pretty small. So that might save 3 to 5 cents, right? So you might go, it's not worth it. Energy is a largely inelastic good. And because our energy bill is not huge, we're not always as motivated as we might be if it was something like calories, And so I think of energy the same way. I use food and weight as an analogy a lot. Like we'll make these behavioral changes in the way we eat based on the data about nutritional information when we care about either losing weight, getting fit, running a mile in under 6 minutes, whatever it is. And so because energy is largely inexpensive, a lot of these changes save very little money. And so it doesn't seem like it's worth it. And it also depends on habit. There are people for whom getting a smart thermostat, because they used to just leave the heater on, they used to leave their heat on all the time. They had a programmable thermostat, but they never programmed it. So they just had it set to 72 the entire winter. And now they've learned, because they put in a smart thermostat, that when they go to bed at night, it can actually go down a little bit. When they wake up in the morning, it's okay. When they leave the house, it's fine if it gets much cooler until they get home. For someone who was already programming their thermostat, they're going to see very little savings. For someone who wasn't, they might see more savings. So it depends on motivation and the replacement behavior. What were you doing before? If you were already eating really healthy, and you cut out one additional item, right? You were already eating pretty healthy and you just cut out that one afternoon cookie, you might not lose weight. If you were eating a lot of fast food and you completely cut it out and switched to a plant-based diet or something else, you might see more weight loss. And it's the same thing with energy.
Got it. And that makes sense. So it feels like maybe the incentives are not on the consumer side. So I can't do much. If I do want to do something that's pretty hard, I'm probably not going to rip out all my old appliances that might be less energy efficient, although I don't feel like they've gotten super energy efficient anyway. So then flipping over, maybe we should be talking about what utilities want, because how do they look at this space and the idea of conservation?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because for utility, it's not a single household, right? Your average utility has thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of customers. And a lot of people don't realize this, but most energy utilities want their customers to use less electricity. It's hard to imagine a company that wants to sell you less of what they're selling, but for energy utilities, almost all do. And there are a couple reasons. One, they're largely publicly regulated. So our energy utilities, there are municipal, so they're either provided by the government or they're regulated by the government because electricity is at this point in our modern era considered a necessity, is something that should be offered to the public. And so government either provides or regulates the provision of energy. Because we have a lot of, if not at the national level, and most of our states and cities have climate regulations or goals in place to reduce emissions, that is often from the city or state level passed along to these utilities. There are aggressive targets every year that are given to utilities to show savings, and they're authorized to spend some of our ratepayer money, the money that we pay for our electricity bill, to then message back to us and provide things like rebates and incentives for energy efficient products and smart home products with the hopes that they will lead to us using less energy. So one reason are these climate legislation. Another is that our utilities are trying to what's called stabilize the grid. They're seeking grid stabilization. So if you think throughout the day and throughout the year, the amount of energy that's used on average changes based on the weather. And if you think that most utilities have their own sources of either coal or nuclear power plants, solar farms that they provide, if you think that when energy peaks on that really, really hot day in July, you don't want to open up a new $200 million nuclear plant for 4 to 12 hours a year. So they have to end up paying at high rate third-party sources for that electricity. So when they have a more stable grid, stable during the day and stable during the year, they're able to meet those needs internally. For those reasons, utilities are strongly encouraged, incentivized, both financially and from a regulatory basis, to try and get people to use less energy at all times and to use more consistent energy. So that's this idea of reducing peak energy use.
One of the ways they've been doing this is demand response. And I've been part of a demand response program for, almost more than a decade. I don't know, a really long time. And my utility, at peak demand, they're like, hey, we're going to stop your air conditioner for a while. And if I don't want to, I opt out. I say, nope, I've got a dinner party. Sorry, utility. That's where we've been for a while. I talk to people and they're like, hey, maybe it'll be involuntary, or maybe it'll be like, we'll just automatically throttle everything back that we can, like hot water heaters, HVAC, those kind of things. And then you can opt back in. Some people talk about like incentivizing based on pricing. If I want to do my dry my clothes during that time, it's going to cost a lot more. How do you think those sorts of programs will evolve as more and more things become both connected to the internet and have, a lot of more computing capabilities?
They are advancing a lot right now. So what you were just talking about, this idea of time of use, is becoming more and more prevalent. So like I said, I'm in California. In California, we're switching right now to time of use rate. And so this idea of daily demand response, as opposed to the programs you're talking about historically have not been daily. So the can we turn your heat down has typically been during like peak summer events. Now we're moving towards, let's try and stem it almost every day. And a lot of this is from a good thing. It's because we're moving to more renewable sources. So as we're relying more and more on solar, we see that solar is provided the most during the day. And then electricity is used the least by your average household at night when we're sleeping. So there's this time, there's often referred to as a duck curve. If you look, the daily load curve in a utility looks a lot like a duck, where it goes up a lot from about 4 to 9 p.m. or 5 to 10 p.m., depending on the region. And that's also when we're getting the least amount of solar, right? Solar is starting to decrease and use is starting to increase. And so what utilities want is for you to use less optional energy. Doesn't mean don't do anything. It means, like you said, maybe dry your clothes after, maybe charge your car after. So what we're seeing is these increased uses like car charging, right? If we really can electrify and we get off fossil fuels in our cars, that's going to increase our electric demand. And we don't want every car in America to start charging the second every person gets down. We'd love for people to charge maybe at 10 o'clock. But when you get home is when you want to plug it in. So utilities are looking for ways to allow you to put the clothing in the dryer when you think about it, or plug in the car when you think about it, but have the energy start being used when it's the most beneficial to the grid, and then either rewarding you, depending on how you look at it, for doing that, or punishing you if you don't via a pricing signal.
I feel like my utility has had time of day, but it's been very blunt as an instrument. So like after 9 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning, between, 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night and 5 in the morning, it's cheaper on a kilowatt per hour basis. What I'm hearing from people is it may start making sense during a demand response event, or maybe just to modulate certain devices to certain times of day. There's a lot of talk about doing something like that, or even having, if it's connected product, even when I turn on my washing machine or my dryer, it'll say, hey, if you wait 2 hours, it'll cost you this much to run your dryer.
Yeah. So there's a few ways when we think about the control capabilities of smart home products. You can think of it in a few kind of buckets. So one is user-based control, right? So that means I'm going to give you information about whether your lights are on or your dryer's running and allow you to manually turn it on or off. I'm just going to either give you the data where it's available on a graph or an app, and you can control your products. A second is rule-based or schedule-based, right? So those are like more the older programmable thermostats. So you can say, you know what, don't run my dishwasher until 10. So I'm going to put my clothing in the dryer and I'm going to press the button that says turn on my dryer, but don't turn it on until 10 o'clock. A third is third-party based. And that's like this demand response, the smart AC programs like you were talking about, where your utility says, will you allow us, when we really need to stabilize the grid, will you let us kind of go in and turn your thermostat up or down a degree or two? And if you don't like what we're doing, you can override it, but you're allowing a third party. And then the fourth is algorithm based. And that's what we're seeing in things like Nest thermostats, where it just starts to learn via a machine learning algorithm your habits. So you don't have to put in rules and say at 10 o'clock, turn the thermostat from 71 to 66 because I'm going to bed. It just starts learning that when you go to bed, you go, okay, you can turn it down. And it starts figuring out when you go to work and when you come home. And via those algorithms, it starts becoming more efficient.
And do the utilities want to get into this, or do you think they'll kind of outsource some of this to maybe Google or an Amazon or maybe a completely different provider?
The answer to both of those questions is yes. The energy industry utilities do want to get into this, and the way they are getting into it is typically through third-party vendor-led programs. So most utility offerings, they're provided via utility staff through a third-party vendor or operator. That's very common. So historically, for example, for years they've been incentivizing energy-efficient light bulbs and dishwashers and washing machines and fridges, but utilities weren't getting in the business of selling refrigerators. They were just providing a pricing signal or an incentive. So the pricing signal in terms of a rebate, as well as kind of a prompt, because they're also mailing something home and saying, hey, you might consider a more energy efficient fridge. If you buy one, we'll give you we'll give you $50 off if you buy one of the ones that's approved by Energy Star. So as they're moving into this new world of not just when we look at going from an energy efficient dryer, which is just one where when you dry it, the dryer itself uses less energy, regardless of anything you do or don't do. It's just a more efficient dryer. So in that model, the only thing they need to get you to do is buy the dryer, and then they're done. They can pat themselves on the back and go, good job, time for lunch. But if you buy a smart dryer, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to wash after 10 p.m. You have the option to set those settings, right? You can buy a smart thermostat and keep your house at 75. It's not going to stop you. It's just going to give you the tools with which to make more energy efficient decisions if you so choose. And so now utilities are realizing, gosh, this is a new world. We can't just offer the rebate and then go to lunch. Once they get the thermostat or the smart washer or the smart what have you, we have to figure out how to motivate and enable, encourage, engage customers to use those products efficiently, because in and of themselves, they are no more efficient. And I'll tell you right now, we're all still trying to figure it out. That's hard because we do not live in a country where most people want their utility to be telling them how to use energy, right? If I pay for it, I can use it however I want. I'm paying. Don't tell me how hot or cold I should have my house.
Yeah, we love our individualism.
Yeah.
I want to kind of sidetrack you just a little bit and ask about this idea of as we put more connected things in our homes. And I actually got a question about this on our IoT podcast hotline, which was, hey, I'm installing all these smart things. Do they, with their Wi-Fi connections, require more energy? And I was just curious if you guys have done research on that or have thought about things like, I've got connected light bulbs, I've got a connected washer and dryer. Is that going to increase my energy load?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the answer is yes, of course. I mean, anything that uses plug load is going to be using some electricity. It's a small amount. So adding a hub, and that's also why there are different kind of connective protocols. So if you bought a set of smart lights, to minimize that, they have a hub that's connecting the lights via something like Bluetooth Low Energy. And so Wi-Fi is only used when it has to be. So we are looking at different, more and less efficient communication protocols. So Bluetooth Low Energy is going to be more efficient than Bluetooth, which is going to be slightly more efficient than Wi-Fi. It does use a small amount. The more things you have plugged in to your home drawing electricity, the more electricity you will be using. They do not use large amounts. If efficiency is gained via changes in behavior, those changes in behavior should more than make up for the increased efficiency. Also, it depends on what you're replacing. If you replace an old school incandescent light bulb or a CFL light bulb with a smart light, that smart light bulb is, I'm pretty sure 100% of the time, I've never seen a smart light bulb that's not a very high efficient LED. So just the energy efficiency of that light bulb, it's going to use less energy. Then if you connect 4 or 5 of those, that one hub that's connecting them is going to take up a small amount of energy, but the light bulbs are more efficient. And if you use that to then keep the lights in the house on, or for the first hour you leave the home and then turn them off or something where you would have left them on all night or all day, then you're going to see increases in efficiency. If you use the lights exactly as you used your old lights, then the only decrease in energy use is going to be just by the efficiency of the bulb itself.
That's kind of along the lines of what I thought. And I'm like, oh man, I'm kind of sad now that I think about all the things I've plugged into my house. Okay, we are a bunch of gadget heads over here. So I have to ask, if my focus is energy conservation, saving money, or just saving energy, what is probably the best item, connected gadget I could buy?
For most homes, the largest use of energy in our home is related to heating and cooling. So for most homes, anything related to your thermostat, home heating and cooling is going to be the most important thing to replace. Really, I think another way of thinking about it is to look at your lifestyle. And for different households, there might be, do you travel a lot? If so, think about your travel behavior. So instead of thinking about a product, you can go, when I go out of town, am I turning off as many things as I can? And that's where the smart home really helps. If we have a family where we all leave during the day, are we really getting our base load as low as possible? And so when you look at whatever you're setting up, really look at your lifestyle and go, when do I think I'm using things that I don't need or don't even know I'm using? And how can the smart home ecosystem help me see that better and get rid of it? So whether it's $1 or $100 a month, those little things, like we said, when you think about everyone in the country, can really add up.
Awesome. All right. Well, Beth, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, if you'd like more IoT news, sign up for my newsletter at stacyoniot.com. We'll see you next week.